So, Steven Bombed Summer 2016 continues, and I'm back again with another boatload of brand new episodes for the week. And with that, the first episode we're going to be looking at today is entitled Restaurant Wars. When Steven's adventurous appetite causes him to order some mozzarella sticks and marinara sauce from his favorite french fry place instead of his regular bits, he ends up accidentally reigniting an age-old culinary war waged between Mr. Fryman and Kofi of Fish Pizza. You see, up until now, these two have gotten along through the help of a truce that made it so that neither one could cut into the other one's business. And I mean, really, have you seen how small Beach City is, how few people there are? You can only assume this is the way they would have to do it just to keep the lights on. To try and one-up each other, the fry place starts selling pizza and the pizza place starts selling fries. Or should I say, they try to. The joke is none of them actually do it very well. It's funny, if you actually freeze frame this episode when you see people overeating and getting sick, you can actually see a couple caricatures of the writers. The war is bad for everyone living in Beach City, but the people who seem to suffer the most are the children of the restaurant owners. They're being overtaxed and overworked by this war, and Steven, empathetic kid that he is, blames himself for all the bad stuff that's going on, and he takes it upon himself to try and fix what he broke. At first, they attempt to go the Romeo and Juliet route. If they could somehow get Kiki and Ronaldo to pretend like they're in a romantic relationship, then surely the dads have to stop being at each other's throats, right? And this plan might very well have worked too, if not for the fact that arch-nerd Ronaldo actually had a girlfriend all along. I know, right? Him of all people. Ronaldo was actually kind of the MVP of this episode. He probably made me laugh more than just about anyone else, from complaining about not getting enough blog time into his wheelie shoes. Also, you notice Ronaldo doesn't go on about conspiracies anymore? Maybe this is some actual growth for his character, or maybe the writers thought a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist wasn't nearly as cute anymore. With the love angle falling on its face, Steven decides that the only other way to get the two restaurateurs to stop fighting one another is to have them find a common enemy to battle against. And because there's like literally no other restaurants in Beach City, he decides the only thing to do is to turn the temple into a restaurant and of course have the gem staff it. Wow, Pearl has gotten a lot of alternate outfits over the last little bit, hasn't she? There's been baseball Pearl, tuxedo Pearl, and now waitress Pearl. Steven proves that he might actually have some culinary genius within his head when he decides to create french fries with ketchup already inside them and pizza bagels that come complete with their own cream cheese. This ultimately proves to be just enough to get Fryman and Kofi to stop fighting each other. Also, hey, something we learned about Fryman this episode, that's not a hat he wears, that's just his hair. Which actually makes total sense looking back on it now, because his kids have the exact same hair, it's just they have it in different styles, not standing straight up. Restaurant Wars, for what it was worth, ended up actually being a really fun episode. I dug that it was a shenanigan-filled episode that actually focused on almost the entirety of Beach City, something they haven't done for a little bit now. Even the gems got in on the fun and games action by the end, which is interesting because they normally stay far away from these more grounded types of episodes. There was also a great theme I observed. Maybe this is just subtext and maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but it's this idea that food, much like all the songs Steven loves to sing, are art, and art shouldn't be done with malice, it should be done with love. Overall, I would feel comfortable giving this one a 7 out of 10. Alrighty then, the next episode on the docket was entitled Kiki's Pizza Delivery Service, an obvious reference to the Miyazaki movie Kiki's Delivery Service. And oh wow, 2 episodes in a row that focus on the pizza family, go figure. Hey, didn't you guys have a funny grandma? Why was she absent in the last 2 episodes? To make a long story short, Kiki is covering for her deadbeat twin sister, and all the extra work is really starting to get to her. In fact, all the stress is starting to manifest itself into horrible Lovecraftian cheese dreams. Steven, while worrying about Kiki, ends up actually managing to somehow cross the barrier into her dreams, this being the second time now this season that Steven has used his powers to jump into someone's subconscious mind. Man, you really gotta stop and think here. If Steven was able to master his abilities, how freaking powerful he would be. Now, unlike with Lar, Steven doesn't quantum leap into Kiki's body. Instead, he's able to assist her in banishing her nightmares. This is a good arrangement for a bit. Steven gets to feel like a hero. In fact, he dubs himself the Dream Warrior, an obvious reference to the Nightmare on Elm Street movie of the same name. Why, he even puts a headband on. Man, that is some super attention to detail. And Kiki manages to actually get some sleep, which she needs because once again her twin sister continues to put her in a rough position. It's clear that Kiki has a problem saying no to her twin, and she's going to have to figure out how to do that quick because all this extra stress is beginning to rebound on Steven. In fact, part of me has gotta wonder, and if I may be so bold as to theorize for a second here, was Steven so beat up because he was sacrificing his own sleep to fight nightmare monsters? Or, and follow my train of thought on this one, is jumping into people's minds and dreams taking up way more of Steven's gem power than he's ever been used to using? Either way, in the end, Steven agrees to help Kiki face her fears and more or less go deep inside her own subconscious to battle the manifestation of her sister and the guilt she feels about not being able to say no. You know, I actually expected this to be some sort of huge apocalyptic battle, but in the end she just tells Chi's sister that, nah, sorry, I can't do it, and she totally understands. Which I guess is the writer's way of telling us that we always make these sorts of situations way worse in our head than they actually are in real life. Also, hey, did you love that initial D reference from a couple episodes ago? Well, we hope you like Evangelion just as much, because we got Pizza-gellion right here for you. Like Steven Universe as a series needed any more nerd cred. In a funny stinger at the end, we find out that Jenny ironically also has trouble saying no to her sister, so you figure maybe it's only a matter of time until Steven might have to help her out of a similar jam. Kiki's Pizza Delivery Service in the end was an okay episode. Honestly, I felt like I learned a lot about the pizza family already in Restaurant War, so this one felt a tad superfluous coming so soon afterwards. It does, however, serve as a nice little showcase piece for Regan Gomez Preston, who is the voice actress for both Kiki and Jenny. And you know, if the show wanted to focus on another twin-centric episode in the future, I would definitely be for it. Overall, though, I would give this one a 6 out of 10. Okay then, so the third episode in the summer Steven bomb for this week was entitled Monster Reunion. And you know what, after quite a few Steven Universe episodes in a row that were a lot more down-to-earth, a lot more shenanigan-based, and a lot more beach city-based, I'm glad to say Monster Reunion finally brings the whole gem stuff back to the forefront. You see, early on in the episode, Steven discovers that his healing spit is working again. Ah yes, that story point that went away but has now come roaring back. With his admittedly god-tier powers returned to him, Steven wants to try and experiment with healing some of the broken gems that they have bubbled in the basement. And honestly, it shouldn't shock anybody that the first gem Steven wants to try and help is the centipede monster that he had taken in as a pet. This was a really big moment because finally the show kind of had to draw a line in the sand and talk about the differences between a gem that is cracked but salvageable, a shattered gem like the gem mutants that we saw a while ago, and a gem that has been corrupted. You see, Steven works his healing magic on the centipede monster, and it works kind of, sort of, not really. With Steven's help, Senti is able to return to a somewhat bipedal, somewhat more humanoid form, but it's clear that while the body may have healed, the mind may never be repaired. This is interesting because this completely changes up the Steven-Senti dynamic that we've seen before. In every other episode when he hung out with the centipede, it was more like a young boy trying to have a pet sort of story. Here the subtext has changed to trying to take care of a friend or family member who is suffering from physical or mental disorders. And trust me, as someone who has been there and seen that firsthand, you can bet this episode hit me right in the old feels. Steven is a patient kid, of course, and eventually he ends up managing to break on through to Senti with the help of art. From here we get an absolutely beautiful scene wherein the centipede monster, through childish crayon drawings, is able to relate to both Steven and the audience their origin. The story that we're told is that Senti was a commander during the Great Gem War, assumedly under Yellow Diamond, as it's a yellowish character giving the orders. Captain got separated from their crew, but to make matters worse, a terrible weapon was activated on the battlefield, assumedly from the Diamonds themselves. Clearly something pushed the Diamonds to fire on their own people, and assumedly it was this destruction that caused certain gems to become corrupted. With her memories slowly but surely flooding back, even though her own body is beginning to decay and revert back to the monstrous form, Senti wants Steven to bring her to her ship, which, as we discover, is actually an alien craft we had seen in a previous episode. Again, man, I love it when Steven Universe flexes its continuity muscles like this. Monster Reunion ends on something of a bittersweet note. Captain and crew are reunited, which is a good thing, but Steven couldn't ultimately save them the way that he wanted to. It is, however, clear though that there is hope for the corrupted gems, that perhaps they could be returned to their original forms one day. We also have an incredibly valuable piece of information now in what turned the tide of the Gem War, and surely we'll be coming back to this sooner rather than later. Monster Reunion might actually be my favorite episode in the centipedal trilogy of episodes. It just kinda hits all the right notes. It's funny one second, sad the next. The idea to tell a complicated backstory via childish crayon drawings was absolutely inspired, I felt, and it had one of those great stinger endings where you just wanted to know what happened next. Overall, I would feel very positive giving this one an 8 out of 10. So, the penultimate episode in this week's rollout of brand new Steven Universe episodes was entitled Alone at Sea. After being put on the back burner for a couple episodes, Lapis once again takes the spotlight. Steven is still attempting to extend the olive branch of friendship to the rather disturbed, rather morose gem, and he hopes that a good way to get her to come out and meet the world is to go for a boat ride. Greg Universe still seeming to have enough money left over from his big city trip and new car to afford to rent a boat for the day. It's nice to see this dude didn't burn through all his money like I thought he would. Water, as you might have guessed, is something of a touchy subject for Lapis. On one hand, it's the source of her amazing power, but it also signifies a great trauma that she suffered. It's interesting too to note that I think Alone at Sea probably more than any other episode brings into focus the very different sort of relationship Steven has with Lapis than he does with any of the other gems. I mean, Garnet and Pearl take motherly, mentorly roles to Steven. Amethyst does this too, but she ultimately feels more like a big sister a lot of the time. That relationship is flipped with Peridot, wherein Steven acts like the older sibling and or mentor to her. But with Lapis, it's all very different. I would describe his relationship with Lapis closer to therapist and patient. And that's really what the bulk of this episode was, Steven trying to get her to open up, to share. And also to be reminded too, like in the fishing scene, that she is a ton of amazing power wrapped up in one very unstable little blue shell. Eventually, Steven does manage to get some progress made, and we find out that Lapis is no longer so much suffering from that whole prisoner complex that she was dealing with after coming back. Mainly because now she has a new laundry list of exciting and terrifying complexes and issues to deal with. Mainly, she's dealing with a lot of guilt right now. It's clear that the stress of being fused as Malachite for so long has really taken its toll on Lapis, mind, body, and soul, as fusion often does. But her feelings manifest in such a way that she feels worthless, she feels useless, she feels like being fused to the evil Jasper was a punishment that she actually deserved. And when Jasper eventually does make her big return this episode to once again try and fuse herself with Lapis, the episode takes another turn and kind of becomes a thesis on, abusive relationships. I mean, everything Lapis says in this episode about how when she was fused with Jasper, they brought out the absolute worst in each other, and yet it was kind of addicting. That's incredibly heavy stuff to put in what many still consider to be a quote-unquote kids show, but it's the sort of complexity that keeps bringing me back every time. In fact, Jasper even really nails the point home by saying, "No, I'm different, I've changed," which is of course the classic standby for any abuser in fiction. In the end though, Lapis finds the strength to overcome this with Steven's help. Jasper escapes to be a problem for another day, one that I'm sure we'll be dealing with sooner rather than later. And as far as Greg's boat, yeah, he's not getting his deposit back on that one anytime soon. Alone at Sea was a very inventive little episode that chose to tackle some very dark, very adult themes in a very mature and very understanding sort of way. I think this is one of those episodes where the messages and what they're trying to impart may completely go over the heads of younger viewers, but I think it's something that will, kind of lodge into people's brains, and they'll think back on it later and really appreciate how smart and clever the writing was. We also get to learn a bit more about Lapis this episode, and perhaps maybe she is more dangerous than Steven or even the audience ever stopped to consider. Overall, I would feel comfortable giving this one a very strong 8 out of 10. The final episode in this week's rollout of brand new Steven Universe episodes was entitled Greg the Babysitter. Now, as we join the episode, Steven and his dad are working away at the car wash. Hey, it's nice to know being a millionaire didn't make Greg quit his day job, huh? Not that he ever seems to get that much business anyway, which, makes you wonder, how does he afford to keep gas in his van? Steven asks a question that I'm sure we've all asked about Greg at one point or another, and that is, how exactly did you get in charge of the car wash? And from that very simple, very childlike question, we are treated to an entire episode-long flashback, something we haven't had for a little while now. What's cool about this episode is that, for a series like Steven Universe, where everyone loves to examine everything and go over every little tiny piece of minutia with a fine-toothed comb, I don't think anyone, I know myself at least, ever really gave that much thought to Greg Universe as a character and what might have been going on with him. He just seems so much like a what you see is what you get type of character, which is why it's so cool for Greg the Babysitter to, give him center stage and really explore all the different layers that he has. In many ways, this episode is Greg Universe Begins. We find out he lives in a van because that was the easiest way to stay close to the temple and stay close to Rose, the woman he loved. We find out he wears cut-off jean shorts because he was constantly tearing his on the fence. Why is he almost always perma-burned? Well, because he lived on the beach for most of his life in a Peter Pan-style existence, one where he didn't exactly make a lot of money either. Speaking of money, this episode more or less tells us straight up that the reason Steven loves his french fry bits so much is because his dad loved french fry bits because he couldn't afford actual french fries, being an actual literal beach bum. And that's just one of the many times this episode draws a lot of really compelling parallels between Steven and his father. You see, for a lot of his younger years, Greg lived essentially a Steven Universe-esque existence, all built around the gems and what they were doing. Of course, unlike Steven, Greg was not one of them and was never really welcomed in 100%. We find out that the only human friend Greg actually had in Beach City was Vidalia of all people, and man, that had to be a pretty awkward friendship when you consider that it was Greg's manager who knocked her up then abandoned her with a child. Also, hey, they were clearly so close back here and now, why aren't they still close in the modern day? Did they just drift apart with family and responsibility, or did they have some sort of actual falling out? That's all up for debate and speculation, but what I do know for sure is that baby sour cream is frickin' awesome. Oh man, I had no idea what I really wanted in my life was comedian Brian Posehn to make disinterested baby noises, but I got it and it's great. Also, hey, why sour cream? I mean, I know his mom is technically named after an onion. Maybe she was just feeling a little extra vindictive and wanted to pass that on to her child. If the title wasn't already a dead giveaway, Greg ends up having to look after baby SC while his mom is at work. This leads to some really great exchanges with Rose, a character for whom much of the show is built around and yet who we don't really know all that much about when you stop and think about it. This episode might actually be the most she's ever talked, and we make some really interesting revelations out of what she says. Much like her son, Rose has a zeal, a passion, a lust for life, as well as a fascination with what most would consider to be mundane human matters. And as an alien, she also seems to really revere and respect what it means to be human. She thinks it's cool that when a human is born, they can be anything they want to be. They grow, they mature, they learn, they transform, unlike gems who quite literally pop out of the ground fully formed into a caste system that tells them exactly what they will do with their lives. No doubt it's this line of thinking that led Rose to lead the rebellion against the diamonds in the home world in the first place. Sour cream, mischievous baby that he is, ends up wandering away and Greg is forced to try and save him, only he can't do it and he himself needs to get saved by Rose in the end. This situation did, however, end up having a positive side effect in that it opened Greg's eyes to how he'd been living his life up to this point, how he was really no different from the baby he was trying to take care of. He decides to buckle down and get his life in order by taking a job at the car wash, and I mean, really, this is the very Greg universe idea of buckling down, maturing, and getting your life in order. These events, however, in a nice twist, eventually do inspire Greg to write Let Me Drive My Van Into Your Heart, which we'll all remember from the second Steven Universe episode. So yeah, everything came full circle. Greg the Babysitter was a really great episode. We learn a ton of backstory, not just for Greg, but for all of Beach City, really. In fact, it's fun to see Beach City in a time before Steven when a lot of stuff isn't the way it is now. The jokes all land, Greg is really funny himself, and he has a great rapport with the other characters. We also get a new song too, and I mean, really, anytime Steven Universe does a new song, I mean, that's reason to celebrate, isn't it? Overall, I would give this one a very positive 9 out of 10. And well, that looks like it'll just about do it for me for another week of Steven Universe episodes. As always, down in the comments section below, be sure to tell me what episode you liked the most from this season and what you're hoping to see next. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching my newest video. I hope you enjoyed it, and while you're here, why not check out another video I have on offer, or maybe if you're feeling in a supportive mood, you want to like or subscribe. And if you want to support the creation of more videos just like this one, then please by all means check out the Cape Joel Patreon. A little bit goes a very long way, and I will see you all next time.